Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister, has concluded his China trip where he met with the President, Xi Jinping. The meeting was so successful, Mr Xi has been invited to visit Australia. Let's bring in now Graeme Smith. He's an Associate Professor at the Australian National University Department of Pacific Affairs. Appreciate your time, thank you. What was your take on the China visit? Was it a success? How do we rate that as a success at the end of it?
Look, we'd have to say it's a success. I mean, as you mentioned, it looks like the annual meetings of leaders are back on the table, which, you know, is a win that we weren't sure about beforehand. Of course, there's still the hostage, Dr. Yang, who's hasn't been released, and our leverage for that now, sadly, is greatly reduced after the visit. But yeah, it seems that you know, trade has definitely warmed up. There's been an 8% increase in trade between the two countries over the last year. So I think overall we would be pretty happy with the way things are going.
And now the Prime Minister's continued on. We're seeing him meeting with Pacific leaders. How significant is that trip? How's Australia's reputation tracking at the moment with our Pacific neighbours? We have seen a lot of commentary, of course, in recent times about some concerns about how Australia deals with these nations in our backyard.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same old problem that we've had for years. And one of my favourite Pacific journalists, a guy called Nick McClellan, said the great thing about this meeting in Rarotonga in the Cook Islands is he could take his stories from 1997 and just change the name of the Australian Prime Minister, and he could run the same story, because climate change is still the one thing that they're looking for us to move on and show more ambition about, and it's unlikely that we're going to be able to do so just by the nature of being the coal exporting country that we are. But on other matters, I think they'd be happy that the PIF seems to be back together again. There was a big split in the Pacific Islands Forum about 2 years ago, where the Micronesian group just left and refused to show up. So they're back at the table, and we should have a new PIF Secretary General soon.
We have seen a few Pacific leaders visiting Australia in recent times. What do you think about the Chinese president heading this way? I saw that the Prime Minister offered him an invitation. Do you think that might be welcomed and received? Could we see him here soon, do you think, or is that still a stretch too far at this point?
I'm not sure it's going to happen next year. What we might get next year is the Premier, a rather colourless chap. I mean, Xi Jinping's not the most colourful bloke anyway, but a rather colourless chap called Li Qiang, the second in charge, might be more likely to visit us next year. I think, you know, Xi has a lot on his plate back at home for him to take another extensive trip to Australia, as he has done, of course, in the past, way back in the Tony Abbott days, you know, way back in 2013, he visited Tasmania and was extremely warmly received. Obviously, the political climate's shifted a little bit since then, so they might be a bit concerned about the sorts of crowds that might be out to greet him this time.
Graeme Smith, really appreciate your analysis. Thanks for joining us.